last week I stood up here and I announced to you that it was the first day of fall, and apparently in doing so I scared it away. So I will make no such proclamations today, but I thought I'd just put some fall imagery on the screens, and maybe subconsciously we can manifest some better fall weather together. But also last week we began our new series, ZOE, and it's a series about living a fuller life, a deeper life, a life of meaning. See, there's a difference, friends, between just physically being alive and actually having a spiritual depth and dimension to our being. And we find this distinction in the ancient Greek word zoe, which refers to spiritual life, as opposed to the word bios, which refers to physical life, right? Blood pumping, breathing air, right? And so the question of this series that motivates our conversations throughout the different topics we're going to explore is, what does it mean to live a full life? And when we're really talking about this full life that we're after, the question arises, how do we fill that life? And are we saying how we fill our time, right? Or how we fill our space, or perhaps how we fill our attention? And we know that the world, right, that culture tells us that this is how we can achieve a full life, right? Like you will be happy if you just fill your time with stuff, that you're always busy, or if you fill your space with physical items, or perhaps, the culture often tells us to fill our attention with just the next distraction, because we never want to be bored, right? And so the question really is if we don't have these things that we're so often told makes a full life, does that mean that our life is empty? Not necessarily, right? And so really what we're curious about today is there a different type of fullness that we're talking about when we say that we want to live a full life? Because how many of us know not every fullness is necessarily a good thing? I'm a big fan of Korean barbecue. Anyone else out there? Yeah. So if you've ever been to Korean barbecue, most of the time it's like you grill the food yourself, and you can kind of order all you can eat, endless plates of meat. And so it really takes me on this journey to kind of the extremes of the human experience, because when I go to Korean barbecue, I'm just so excited. It's one of my favorite meals, favorite flavors and all that. And then by the end of Korean barbecue, I'm so full that it just kind of puts me to the edge of what it means to be human. I feel like I need to just rest for a while in that booth. Perhaps they could close the restaurant down and let me just leave quietly in the morning. Not all fullnesses are made equal, right? Some fullness isn't actually good. And when we think about a full life, is a full life simply a life that is packed to the brim? Or is it a life where we are more fully present with what is right in front of us? Right? And so when we're talking about the distinction between bios and zoe, we're also going to be talking about this distinction between being physically present and being spiritually present. Because how many of us know you can be somewhere doing something, and yet you're not truly there? Maybe that was an experience that you had with a parent growing up. Maybe that was an experience that you've had with a partner. Maybe you've been that person not fully present in certain experiences of life. I know I feel guilty of this all the time. And I'm sure there are those of you out there that can relate, right? You walk into a room and you've already forgotten why you're there, like you're like, I need to, and I do this with the bathroom sometimes, I've left something in the bathroom, and then I'll walk into the bathroom and I'm like, I've daydreamed along the way. So then by the time I make it to the bathroom, I've forgotten what brought me in there. And I go, well, I guess I had to go to the bathroom, right? And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, you didn't even have to go. You left your phone or something, So we can kind of walk through life without being fully present in our bodies, in our consciousness. And yet the opposite is also true. We probably know someone, or we've found this in our own lives, where whatever we're doing, even if it's unpleasant, even if it's boring or mundane, we can fully be in that experience. This is so often what we talk about when we refer to the Zen tradition, right? We say something or somebody is so Zen. Really, we're talking about someone fully invested in that experience, whatever it is. There's a Zen proverb: when walking, walk. When eating, eat. Say it again: when walking, walk. When eating, eat. Yeah. Oh, nice. Y'all said it with me. One more time. When walking, walk. When eating, eat. Sometimes, it's not ideal scenarios. I was thinking about this today. I was thinking, when cleaning up your garbage that a pack of javelina is knocked over, clean up your garbage that a pack of javelina is knocked over. You just got to be with that experience. And what's interesting about this is there's a paradox here. There's an implied choice here, because if we're being asked or encouraged and invited to walk while walking and eat while eating, then it's possible that we can walk without walking or eat without eating, right? Because there's a choice here. And really what it shows us is that when it comes to this question of how to live a full life, there is a difference between physically doing something or being physically present in an activity and being spiritually present, right? And again, that word spiritual can mean all different kinds of things. Certainly it will in this room. And it's really just about whatever it means to you, a depth, a dimension, a deeper source of meaning in your life. And so today, when we talk about this aspect of spiritual presence, where is that presence taking place, right? Like, what are the dimensions of presence in our life? And see, what I've explored is that there is the when, the where, and the what, right? There is the time, right? That moment that you are being present in. There is the space that you are occupying. And then there is the focus of your attention, right? Where your awareness is going. These, friends, are the three dimensions of presence: time, space, attention. And the reality is, whether we realize it or not, we can only ever truly be in one at any given time, right? We can only be in one place at a time. We can only occupy one moment at a time. And we can only have one thing truly in our awareness at a time. And so the only time we are ever in is now. The only place we are ever truly in is here. And the only thing that you are ever truly focusing on is this. It's another word for where is your awareness? It's always in this experience, right? And now, physically, when it comes to our bios, we understand that we can only be in one place or one time, doing one thing at a time. Or maybe not. Maybe you're someone out there who says, no, I can do multiple things at a time. How many of you would consider yourselves multitaskers? Oh, I'm coming after you. You're trying to talk about eating while driving. You're coming up. You're next. Now, those of you who consider yourselves multitaskers, I hate to do this. I hate to burst your bubble. But I have some science I want to share with you today that shows that perhaps multitasking is a bit of an illusion. See, cognitive psychologists, people who study neurology, what they've found is that this idea of multitasking, it's actually a bit of a misnomer, that in reality, what our brains are engaging in is something a lot more like serial tasking or sequential tasking, meaning our brains move so fast that we perceive it as multitasking when in fact we are just doing one thing after another very fast, or jumping between tasks so fast that we can't perceive it and we think we're doing multiple things at once. It's actually exactly how computers work. Sometimes We'll task a computer, right, with doing all kinds of things at once. And depending on your computer, it probably might crash, right, if you have an old enough computer. But if you have a new enough computer, you might have the illusion that your computer is doing all these different things at once. It's downloading something, it's streaming something, it's playing music, all that other stuff. And what's actually happening is that the computer is just jumping from task to task so fast that it creates the illusion of multitasking. And this was hard for me. It's kind of burst my bubble because I'm the kind of person, I don't know if you're like me, I like listening to music or a podcast when I do chores or any kind of task around the house. And what I've learned today is that, I'm not listening to a podcast while I'm doing chores. I'm jumping from podcast to chores to podcast to chores so fast, but it's still just one thing at a time, which probably explains why I don't even know what I was listening to in the podcast and my clothes are folded terribly. But it's the same thing when it comes to eating while driving, right? Which is why I don't recommend it, and it's particularly dangerous because today what we've learned is that you're not eating while driving. You're eating, then driving, then eating, then driving so fast. Be careful. Be careful, Bill. I'm wondering, you might not even do that. It's okay. There you go. Is anyone out there brave enough to admit the most outrageous example of multitasking in your life?
Yeah. Texting while driving.
Oh, no. Get her.
Stop lying.
Oh, read the newspaper. How do you read the newspaper with one hand, and then you have Carl's Jr. with the other hand, and then you're driving with your knees, I'm guessing? Anyone else? All right, I get it. You know that this is going online, and maybe the FBI is watching, and you're just like, we need to be careful. Well, I appreciate those of you who are brave enough. But the reality is, we are only ever doing one thing at a time, and perhaps this is a blessing. This is a gift. This is a fundamental aspect of the human experience. And one way that I find this to be really helpful is if I am ever overwhelmed in my life. The illusion that I buy into how many of you face this to-do list that's ever growing, and you're like, this is just too much. And part of our brain tells us, I need to be able to tackle it all at once. Like if I can't fight this thing, right? If I can't summit this mountain, I don't know what I'm going to do. And the reality that we need to remind ourselves that we can only do one thing at a time. Whenever you're overwhelmed, you can only take life on one step at a time. And yet we so often buy into this illusion of being able to be in multiple places at once, doing multiple things, right? And it ends up costing us. And I wonder about that cost, right? Because when it comes to our physical being, our bios, it is a given that we can be in one place at a time. But when it comes to ZOE, when it comes to our spirituality, our consciousness, where we are directing our spirit, that is a choice, right? You're not necessarily guaranteed to exist in the same space that your body's existing in, right? Because how many of us know that you can be in the present, yet lost in the past? Or you can be having a conversation with somebody, and yet you're more focused on what you're going to say next than what they're saying to you. Or sometimes we're in these beautiful, magical moments of life, and yet a fear comes in, and we become more worried about holding on to this moment and preserving it than even enjoying it, right? And so what I want to do today is I want to go through each dimension of presence and really explore how might we more fully inhabit each of them. And I want to start with the now, with time. And when I think about time, I think about this thing that we all face, a challenge we all face in our culture today, which is hurry, the prevalence of hurry. And hurry seems to show up in all the different tasks we do in so many areas of our lives. And so I wanted to kind of hone in for a little bit on a particular thing that we all have in common, most of us at least, and it's grocery shopping. And to talk about grocery shopping, I actually want to bring in a clip. And this clip is from a podcast from this woman who interviews people of all these different types of careers and jobs. And on this particular podcast episode, she's interviewing a guy who works at Trader Joe's. Any Trader Joe's fans out there? Yes. That's the easiest hand up I've ever gotten in my entire time here at Aldea. Nice. I love that. Big Trader Joe's fan myself. It's fall, so you know that you're about to get all the good fall stuff from Trader Joe's. But also, if you're a fan of Trader Joe's, you know that there's like a good vibe, right? There's just a cool... I worked at Whole Foods, growing up, and there's just a vibe. And with Trader Joe's, there's just something you notice about the company culture. Mostly everyone seems to be having a good time, right? And so in this podcast, in this conversation, the host asks this guy, Asher, who works at Trader Joe's, kind of like, what are some of the things you've most learned? And his answer is really about this aspect of being in the now. And so just take a minute, check out this clip.
So you work with people all day.
All day.
Is there a common thread that you have found among both the customers and your coworkers?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell me what that is?
The faster you're moving, the more you're in fear. And the more you're in fear, the more you're thinking about yourself. And the more you're thinking about yourself, the less compassion and kindness you have for others. So if you want,
Hello?
there's no love in hurried and stressed. And the more that you're hurrying and the more that you're stressing, the more that you're missing the magic. There's nowhere to go. We got a meat car. You can go left, you can go right, you can go forward, you can go backwards. But your DNA is going to tap out between 80 and 120 years. And while you're here on Earth in this body, you got nowhere to go. Chill out and love your moments. Quit
So what did
stressing.
you eat before?
Like a
before
pound
this?
of mushrooms.
Yeah, hello?
No, nothing. I had that thing I told you about, the chana masala with the rice cake added in.
You gonna
Rice
sprinkle
ball.
a little something extra in there? There's no...
I'm just completely
We're high on
100%
life, baby.
organic right now.
Damn.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, if you're feeling stressed, you can just go get a job at Trader Joe's, and it will probably help. We can all let's just all go right now. Let's leave here, and I'll go apply at Trader Joe's. But it's interesting because it really raises this idea that when it comes to the now, what we so often face in our culture is this sense that being in a hurry adds value to our lives, right? That being in a hurry somehow makes us more important. We've all been part of conversations. We've probably been the person saying these things where without realizing it, we're bragging about how busy we are, right? It gives us this sense that we mean something to the world, and yet it's taking so much more than it's giving, right? And sometimes hurry shows up in areas of our lives where it doesn't even really need to be there, but it's so permeated our culture. You know, I would consider myself someone who's a very hurried traveler, not very fun to travel with. If you have this idea out there that, oh, maybe Jake would be someone to be fun to go on vacation with, I hate to burst your bubble. Not so, okay? I'm a very hurried and anxious traveler. And it's been interesting moving here because if you've ever flown out of the Tucson International Airport, what you have probably found is that you really do not need to be in a hurry there. It is one of the quietest airports I've ever seen. I've tried to be late just to test it out to a flight at the Tucson International Airport, and it's impossible, I can tell you. It seems that no matter how late you are, time bends and warps around the airport. But yet I still can't shake the hurry. What it showed me is that the idea that we're going to arrive at some time where we'll finally feel at peace, it's a bit of an illusion, right? Because if we're living our life in a hurry, what makes us think that when we arrive where we think we want to be, that we're all of a sudden going to be able to turn it off? Because it becomes our mindset. But friends, there is no then that all of a sudden we're going to be at peace. Because what is hurry, if not a subconscious belief that the future is going to be better than the present, or then is going to be better than now? Why else would we hurry through things? Right? We hurry through tasks, we hurry through our work because we just want to be free of those things. And yet the idea that there is some kind of then, some kind of future that'll be better than the now, it's an illusion, and it's really an enemy of presence. And so what I want to invite you to and propose to you is if we might adopt a different approach. And in order to do this, I want to kind of suggest a word that is not even actually technically a word, but I like it. And the word is unhurriedness. Unhurriedness. I put it into Microsoft Word and the red squiggly lines show up, so it tells me that's not actually a word, but I think it should be. I'll lobby for it to be a word. And this idea of unhurriedness, it reminds me that sometimes in life, the best qualities, or at least the best way of understanding certain qualities, it can be the lack of something. That perhaps the lack of hurry is something to strive for. Have you experienced this in your life? That getting rid of hurry freed you, brought peace, right? There's a theologian named Dallas Willard who was known for this quote, really encouraging us to be about the ruthless elimination of hurry. The ruthless elimination of hurry, right? Because how many of us know that it's really great to spend time with someone where you feel like being with you is where they want to be, right? That they have nowhere else that they'd rather be than with you, right? It's an unhurried way of approaching relationship. And on the opposite end, right, it doesn't feel so great to be with someone who feels like they just barely fit you in and then they just always got places to go, people to see. May we adopt an unhurried approach to life, because life is constantly reflecting it back to us. Nature is unhurried. Emerson said, adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience. Lao Tzu said that nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. There was a movement that arose in the 1980s called the slow food movement. And it was really inspired by a man named Carlo Petrini, who was an Italian man who in Rome was protesting the opening of a McDonald's in the Spanish Steps in Rome. And basically he was saying, is there no line we will draw? Is nothing sacred, right? Is there nothing that will be devoured by this machine of fast food? And really it became a movement of questioning, what have we gained and what have we lost when we apply this hurry mentality to every industry, to every aspect of our world? See, when it comes to fast food, certainly we gained quantity. We gained a sense of productivity. Money was gained, but what was lost? Quality, a connection to one another, and a connection to the food and how it got here, right? I grew up in Southern California where there's an In-N-Out everywhere, and In-N-Out specifically has gear to help you eat in your car, like they make it, they're like, please eat in your car. They ask you, they're like, do you want to eat in your car? Are you sure you don't want to eat in your car? We promise it's good, right? And we lose this connection to what we're doing. See, friends, the more we commodify things like food, the more we're just commodifying ourselves and our own experiences. And so this slow food movement gave way to something called the slow living movement, applying it to every aspect of life. And it really stands right in the face with another movement that we might recognize in our world today, which we call hustle culture. This idea that, you're only valuable if you're moving as fast as you can to make as much money as you possibly can. That is where your value comes from in life. And slow living really defies this. It says, hey, where in our life can we slow down? And I'd ask you that question. Where are the areas in your life that move fast, right? That you've adopted a fast living mentality? How can you slow it down? Now, the next time you hear a rattlesnake in the bushes, I'm not suggesting slow living at that point. But most of the time, friends, we go fast when it isn't serving us. There's a man who wrote about the slow living movement, Honoré, and he says the central tenet of the slow living philosophy is to take time to do things properly, thereby enjoying them more. What happens when we slow down? We enjoy things more. What happens when we're unhurried? We realize there's actually nowhere to go. What happens when we get rid of the illusion of then? Well, we find ourselves more fully in the now. And if we're here in the now, then one thing we'll also recognize is not just when we are, which is this moment, but where we are, which is always here, that second dimension of presence. And the truth is that no matter how well we are, or how well we do at recognizing the fact that we are always here, there's always a part of us that wants to be elsewhere, right? That wants to be there. Some of you, no shame, some of you in the last 15 minutes have thought about where you're going for lunch. That's okay. Love you anyway, no worries. I do it in my own life, right? Sometimes we'll have date night plan, and so we'll be at home, and we'll be so excited to go out to dinner, and then it's like, all right, we're here, but we want to be there. We want to already be at the restaurant because we already looked up the specials on Instagram, and we're excited, right? It looks really good, so we want to be there. Then we finally get there, right? We're so excited, order our food, eat our food, and within 5 minutes, we're so tired, and we already want to be home again. Okay, so we spent all day here, wanting to be there, then immediately we get there and we want to be back here. We always want to be elsewhere, friends. And the thing is we live in a time where we are able to move faster than we ever have in all of history. which means that if our here isn't interesting, if our here isn't comfortable, then we just want to get there. And yet, Eckhart Tolle reminds us that because you are never fully here, you are always busy trying to get elsewhere. You're never fully here because you're always busy trying to get elsewhere. See, the problem is if we're not here, and we're really not there, because how could we ever be there? Then we end up nowhere, right? And last week, we talked about this space that we sometimes end up in, halfway between the bios and the zoe, right? Halfway between a full experience of our bodies and a full experience of our spirit. Last week, we kind of talked about it in reference of fully being your authentic self, but it also is true of this, right? Because sometimes we're not fully in our bodies and we're not fully in our conscious experience, and we end up in this middle ground. But if we can fully embody the moment that we're in, the place that we're in, this body that we're in, right? Allowing us to be fully spiritually present, aligning both the body and the mind, we end up moving from nowhere to now here. Magic of the space bar, right? See, things like meditation are great practice for this because so often we get pulled into nowhere, and it's this practice of returning to here. Meditation so often is a muscle of learning how to go from nowhere back to now here. And yet you might say, Jake, my here isn't always interesting. Maybe sometimes it's really difficult. It's really challenging. Maybe sometimes it feels unsafe. The mystic poet Kabir said that wherever you are is the entry point. May we see an invitation to see all the beautiful things, all the beautiful opportunities about our here, right? Rather than resisting the place that we're in, trying to escape from the place that we're in, what if we found beauty in the spaces that we occupied, giving our full attention, right? Because if we can see this place in the here and now as the entry point, right, then it opens us up to a deeper awareness of our own experience, right? Which leads us to the final dimension of presence, this, wherever our attention is going. See, we've talked about the time that we occupy, this moment, and we talked about the place that we always occupy, here, and so we end with this, which is, what is your attention on? What are you focusing on in any given moment? The reality is that we aren't in control of very many things in this life, right? We're not in control of a lot of what happens to us. We're not in control of what others are going to do, right? We're not in control of many ways of how the world shifts and changes, but one thing we can control, which has so much more power than we often realize, is where we put our attention and our focus. Meditation teacher Lokos says that our life is the sum total of where we place our attention. Where your attention goes, right? This is your experience. This is your life. And yet so often, our focus moves to something other than the now and other than the here. And it's especially true in this age we live in, this modern digital information age, where our attention has become a commodity, right? Our attention is being sold to the highest bidder. This isn't anything you haven't already heard, right? But the reality is that our ability to be distracted makes people money, right? Because we have advertisements that are thrown in front of us, distracted instead of being in the moment. And in this age, when our attention has become a commodity, our focus becomes a superpower. And our attention becomes our treasure, something worth safeguarding. But see, friends, if our bios, if our physical reality is the highest reality, if we are nothing more than physical beings and there's no reason to pursue any kind of spiritual depth and dimension to our lives, if we're nothing more than brains and a nervous system, then I guess where your focus and attention goes isn't really of any consequence other than survival. But if we believe that there is something more to this life, however you choose to define it, more than just surviving, but that ZOE, that spiritual component, right? Then in that case, where our focus and attention goes is everything. How many of us have had experiences in our lives where we realize that where our attention goes changes our experience of reality? When we're focusing on gratitude, we're focusing on the good things in our life, it changes the way we feel. It even changes our bios, our physical experience. And the same is true when we focus on the negative, when we focus on the lack, what we don't have. Where we put our attention has a huge impact on our entire experience of reality. Whereas Dr. Joe Dispenza says, the more you focus on the good, the more good will come into your life. Where you place your attention is where you place your energy. A couple years ago, right before we moved here from Seattle, which in fact would have been almost exactly 2 years ago right now, because we've nearly been here 2 years. Right before moving, we went to our last Seattle Mariners baseball game for at least the time being. And the thing about attention when it comes to the Mariners is that if you go to a Mariners game, your attention is probably not on the game because the Mariners are not very good. So you're probably focusing on other things, but it's still a lot of fun. And so we were meeting with some friends and kind of saying some goodbyes. And in this group that we were in, there was a couple people that we had never met. And so I was in a conversation with this person that I hadn't met. And he was like, oh, what do you do? Or you're moving, what's going on? And so, kind of end up telling this guy that we're moving. And then he's like, why are you moving? I tell him about Aldea. And he asks, spiritual community, what do you mean by spiritual? Maybe you've got this question before when you're talking about Aldea to other people. And I felt a little bit in that moment like, all right, he's testing the waters. He's feeling me out, right? Maybe you've felt this before. People are like, what are you talking about when you're talking about spiritual, okay? And so, I had this moment where I realized, all right, like, I don't know this person. I don't know what his life experience has been. And so I just want to be honest. And I also just wanted to really share, what that word spiritual can mean in a way that can really apply to anybody, regardless of your experience. And so the words that came out of my mouth were, well, I don't think there's anything more spiritual than the present moment. And he seemed to like that. That seemed to satisfy him. He was also a couple beers in, so that might have been a part of it. But I kind of was like, all right, I think that works, right? And then that stuck with me as a bit of a motto. It's helped me a lot because when people ask me, what is a spiritual community? What does spiritual mean? Friends, we're not asking you to believe in a certain thing. That's dogma, right? We're not asking you to agree that has to be something totally other than and separate from this life experience. No, what we're just saying is that there is a depth and a way to pursue a deeper experience of this, of what you're doing, of the now, of the here, of the this, of who you are right now. That can be spiritual, right? But you might say, well, going deeper into this moment sometimes is frustrating. Sometimes it's annoying, right? Especially when the moment is something you'd rather avoid, right? Let's take something like traffic, which I hate to break it to you, but traffic in Tucson isn't that bad. I know I'm going to get in real trouble for this one, but it's not that bad, But let's just say you're sitting in traffic, and rather than being in the now, you'd rather be then, right? Now, rather than being here, you'd rather be there. Rather than doing this, you'd rather be doing that, right? What if we could get it out of our heads that we could ever be in a moment that wasn't meant for us, right? Or what if we could get it out of our heads that we could ever be in a moment that couldn't be somehow used for our highest good? That every negative situation can be given a positive outlook. And we might even realize that that's our only choice, right? To pull away from the experience of the moment, which really leads us nowhere, or to ground ourselves deeper into what we're doing, which brings us to now, here, and this. So what do? We embrace the annoyance, right? And then you might find that all kinds of blessings arise. You're in traffic, and what felt like a jail cell, all of a sudden you can switch it and you can go, no, this is my private meditation chamber. I have my tunes. I'm in a semi-comfortable chair. I have air conditioning, I'm alive, right? And all of a sudden you can just, as best as you can switch, you can change your perspective and experience your reality in a different way, because instead of pulling away from that moment and that place and that object of your attention, you go deeper into it. Sometimes the only way out is in. Now, here's the encouragement I have for us, friends. The now and the here and this, it's always right in front of us. It's no further than a moment away. And it makes this a really simple ask. All we need to do is stop looking elsewhere. That's it. So perhaps ZOE, right? A spiritual life, a full life, is not a life filled with things, but it's a life fully experienced in the present moment, in the place that you're in, doing the very thing that you're doing. So I just want to take a moment. If you're comfortable and you'd like to, you can close your eyes. But I just want to invite us all to tune into the now, to tune into here, to tune into this. What does it feel like? Not to pull away, but to go deeper into this experience. Right? Maybe it means noticing your body and how your body feels in a given moment. Maybe it's noticing the joy that you have of being with the people that you're with, right? That comfort. Maybe it's both beautiful and difficult emotions, not trying to push them away, but just allowing them, because they too are the direct experience that's right in front of you. And realizing that perhaps it doesn't get any more spiritual than this. And just letting ourselves enjoy it, letting ourselves find peace. Not that everything's going to be perfect, but we've lost the desire to try to change it. And we realize that that was so much of the problem. So as you're comfortable, we can open our eyes. I want to thank you for being here today, for joining us, for giving this place and this moment your time and your attention.